Hello, everyone, and welcome to Game 5 of the WOSC Blitz tournament that I played in Barcelona. So let's just get straight into the game. So I am 2-2 in this tournament now, and I had Gote in this game. My opponent goes straight for a Gokigen Nakabisha. And so I was very well prepared with my strategy that I wanted to play against Gokigen Nakabisha. And that's this move, essentially, this fast night jump, and yeah, this prepares a very fast pawn to 4-5 in a very certain timing, and that timing is right now. So, I've looked at this position many, many times with an engine, and I know that king to 8-2 is not a move. And yeah, basically, I think you have to take the pawn, or else, you get to put in a pretty rough spot. Um, so I think already I'm doing very well in this game. I know this position almost exactly as I've prepared it. And I know, okay, let me push this pawn. My opponent plays a bit of a different move, which is to take with the bishop instead of the pawn. I don't face this that much. But I know that in these positions, generally speaking, when they take with the bishop, you can just take with the rook because you have drops like this. Now, I think here it was probably better not to run the rook. Not necessarily to protect or to run the knight, but there's just kind of other better moves to play in that situation than running the rook. Because of course, if I take the rook, then you can just take back. It helps you create your castle, and I have to spend an extra turn taking the rook. And so now my opponent's in a bit of a tricky spot. This attack is kind of slow. So he's like trying to attack my knight, but I'm going to be able to take the lands, and this hits the silver. So here my opponent decides to counterattack. That's a spot where I think the engine wants to protect the silver with a pawn, which is a hard move. But yeah, even now, I just have so many threats. So he tries to drop a pawn to, I guess, kick my horse away. I'm not 100% sure why I didn't just take it. I mean, I guess then again, he gets like gold 5-2 with tempo. So I just decided to run my horse away here. It also prevents some like pawn drops on the silver's head, prevents knight drop on 4-5. I think the one downside is that it kind of gets in this line with the silver. Um, but this is still just a very, very good position for me. My king is safer. I have material advantage. I decided to drop the silver on this side, and I think I regretted it pretty quick because I could have just dropped it on the other side. But I knew that this move is coming, right? This knight drop. So I think overall it was okay. I mean, obviously, I think I could have got the knight drop for sure if I would have, or still if I would have dropped it on the other side, and I prevent him from taking the lance. So that was a little bit of an oversight, I think. Dropped it to the wrong side. But yeah, I get the knight gold trade, and again, I'm in a really, really nice position. Um, and I just have to find my way through now, right? So my horse right now is better than the dragon, and even I would say my bishop is better than his rook. The rook's kind of in the middle of nowhere and staring at his own pawn. Apparently, my opponents would like me to place my pieces a little bit neater than I do. I think in the blitz matches, sometimes the pieces fly all over the place. And I'm somewhat used to playing online. I don't really have to bother with placing my pieces neatly. um, so here I decided to take a think. It wasn't immediately obvious to me what the best move would be. I have something like gold drop 5-2 to hit the rook, but then okay, the rook runs, and then I'm gonna have to probably go like horse to 5-3 or something. I just decided to play it a bit safe, get my king a little bit in a safer spot, defend 8-7. He decides to drop the lance to attack 8-7 anyway, so here I have to deal with it in some fashion, right? So if I can't really just allow lance takes 8-7 and then the dragon come and take my gold on 6-9. So here I decided, okay, let me just drop a pawn. It defends. He goes ahead and drops his lance and knight. And so now I'm feeling a little bit of pressure, right? Like he's doing a good job, even though he was at a material disadvantage, using these minor pieces very well. I decided, okay, let me just try and defend. This is not the best move. I think I gave away a decent chunk of my advantage here. I think the best move for my opponent might have been just to like take, like take with the lance, gold takes, take with the knight, king takes, drop the knight back, and then you get to drop a gold. So maybe that was better for my opponent. I'm not sure. My opponent goes ahead and drops this knight, so I go ahead and take the pawn on 5-5. This lets my bishop run before the knight jumps to 7-6. I get a pawn out of it. Maybe I have some, some silver moves to push the dragon out or something. But yeah, generally it just gives my king a little bit more room if I need it. The bishop gets out from the scope of the knight. I think just in general, this is a move that I want to make. So here my opponent makes this rook move. It's a good move, right? I drop my pawn all the way back on 3-9, so I can't drop a pawn here. I do get to bring my horse into 5-3, at least hits the rook. I think here probably what he wants to do. I guess he can't really sack the rook, just because I can take with the bishop on 5-5. He decides to try and come back and skewer my my horse and my bishop, but okay, like I just need to prevent him from getting any of my major pieces. So I can't drop a pawn, or else it's Nefer. So I decided, okay, let me just go ahead and drop my lance. And I think here, my opponent is definitely in a tough spot with what to do with his rook, because he's not able to bring it around to 3-1. But he decides to just sack it off for the lance and try so that he can drop a lance, another lance on this file. The problem with his rook sack for the lance here, even though he gets the attack on the 8th file, he basically just runs out of pieces, and he can't actually capture because my king has too much room to run. So he goes ahead, drops the lance, and here I'm trying to figure out, okay, do I need to defend? Can I attack? I think I decided I need to defend just because the knight is still on, what is that, 6-4? I think my plan here is when the knight jumps, then my bishop gets very scary. That bishop on 5-5 is even scary when the knight jumps. And so in one way or another, I really want a knight, right? And so if I just defend 8-3 enough, then I'm gonna get a knight. And then if he jumps that knight away from 6-4, then I'm going to be able to drop a knight on 7-4. So I think that's generally speaking what I'm playing for. I think he sees that it's a little uncomfortable for him, so he wanted to drop the pawn. But I know, okay, I need to keep the bishop on this diagonal. He goes ahead and decides to jump this knight now, and obviously my plan is kind of coming to fruition. Right, is okay, how can I get this? I want one of his knights and I want to drop it on 7-4. So I think he probably needs to play in a way that does not give me a knight. So okay, let's say he takes on 8-3 with the lance. I take with the gold. He takes with the lance. I take with the. If I can't take with the gold because that's me, right? So Yeah, actually here it's a little tricky. Like he needs to take with the lance, and then I guess I take with the silver, and then he takes with the lance. I take with the gold. So as long as I do it in the right order, if I give him the gold first and then I take with the silver, then it's mate. Um, so yeah, I think yeah. Looking at the clock, I'm down to about 2 minutes here. My opponent still has 3 minute 45, and I'm just trying to figure out exactly what the heck is going on, what I need to do here. Um, I think the move is to set up Sumero. I decided to drop this rook, basically saying, "Hey, you better come attack me." So now here, I think is one of my opponent's biggest mistakes here is that he goes with the knights first, when he should almost certainly be going with the lances first because he can't give me a knight, right? Because I get to drop it on 7-4. I decided to take one more time and then run. And this is the reason why the way that he attacked is probably not right. Um, he needed to go with the lances first and keep the knight on 7-6, is that? So that my king can't run this way. I think that was really his only. I think technically it still does. The attack still doesn't work unless I mess up. Um, but I think this way, for sure, it doesn't work because he really has no way of preventing my king from going into like 5-9, 6-9, and even like I can go even all the way around. And he drops this gold, which actually I think it's potentially one of the worst moves you can make in the position, just because it actually just puts a gold directly in the path of my knight drop that I want to make anyway. So I think he just didn't see this knight drop. And here, yeah, like I get to move my horse to 6-2, which is what I want to do anyway. And I get to do it while taking a gold. So yeah, just the end game here a little bit. I mean, he had some time. He probably should have taken some time to think about it. So I have about a minute left, and I'm just like, okay, like there's definitely something to just completely end the game here. And so I'm just taking some time to think, and I find this gold drop on 8-2, which is just a mate, actually. I take with the knight, and then after king takes my, I get the sorry, rook takes on 6-2 with a promotion, and I have a silver and a gold in hand. So it's just mate. So I think my opponent just made a couple mistakes that were pretty big. Um, and I believe right here is where my opponent resigns. Cause yeah, like he has to block it, but then I just get to drop a silver on 7-1, and there we go. Yeah. So like there are just a couple key spots where my opponent made some mistakes. I got like a really nice lead, but my opponent did a pretty good job counterattacking on that eighth file, but maybe he committed to it a little bit too much, and then just I would say slightly misexecuted the attack. So let's go and check that out a little bit in Lee Shogi. So I guess I was trying to analyze the game a bit earlier. So if you recall, this started as a Gokigen Nakabisha, and this is a position I'm very familiar with right here. My opponent ran the king, which is one of the variations. But this variation, I mean, there's a variation with the silver comes out. These are both pretty good for Gote, actually. And I think the best move in this position for Sente is actually to bring the gold to 7-8. And the reason why that's the best move is because you need to protect the 8th file. Right, so if you don't protect the 8th file with the gold here, my pawn drop on 4-5 is very, very dangerous because I'm going to be able to trade bishops and break through with my rook on the 8th file. He moves the king, I push, he moves the king again, I push again, and here is where my opponent decided to go for the line where he takes with the bishop. This is a very tricky line to play. It's already better for Gote. It's not super, super better, so it's like minus 1.1. But it's tricky because you're playing down a piece, right? You're playing down a knight here, and you're letting me make a horse. So you need to play really, really well in order to kind of hold this position. And already with this this pawn push, my opponent has gone slightly wrong. Now, I also go slightly wrong by taking the lance. Actually, the engine likes horse back to 6-7, And the reason why the reason why the engine doesn't like this pawn push is because it actually blocks the only escape square that the silver had, right? So now it's getting taken by the horse no matter what. In fact, in order to prevent that, the engine thinks the best move in this position is rook drop 6-8 to protect the silver. But yeah, that doesn't happen. I didn't see that, so I went ahead. What I saw was, oh, I can take the lance. He's gonna take. I'm gonna take. He's gonna take. I'm gonna take, and I'm just like up like a clean silver. So I think it's like what I gave up a knight for a lance and a silver. And I'm like, okay, that's like very good for me, and I'm threatening this knight job. My opponent he decided to go ahead and drop this pawn. I just moved back, and then he dropped this rook. I think my opponent, the way he's playing, I think reminds me a little bit of how I play sometimes, which is that he's thinking a little bit too much about his own moves and not enough about my moves and how to stop them, right? So like I think this knight drop is a very obvious threat, and he's not preventing it. And maybe he thought that, okay, well, if the knight drops there, I'll be able to take with tempo anyway. But just like you need to think just like one move ahead, right? I have these silver drops which hit the rook and protect the silver. And I think I mentioned this. Yeah, I definitely mentioned this in the live analysis. It's much better to drop the silver on 8-2 because it guards this and this. All right, so here, I don't know. Actually, I'm not even sure. Yeah, Engine wants to promote this way, but it's like, this is really sad. Because now I'm getting this knight drop without having to give up the lance. And I mean, if I really want to be mean, I can like drop a pawn here or something at some point, and it's just like his stuff isn't going anywhere. I mean, it's probably not actually a good move, but yeah. Okay, so I dropped the silver on the wrong side, but I get this knight drop, which kind of makes up for it. Here I moved the king. I just couldn't find a good move, and Engine thinks bishop 5-5 is the best move, which makes a lot of sense. It hits scoping the king. I don't have the knight in hand yet, but I mean, we can push the pawn potentially. We can double stack and drop a lance, which we can just promote. This is eyeing the dragon. Yeah, I think it's just a generally good move. I mean, other than this, the engine just wants to like calmly push the edge pawn. What else does it want to do? It wants to move my gold back to prevent these ideas, which is actually what happened in the game. So that's a nice move too. But of course, we moved here. He dropped the lance. I dropped the pawn. Engine here still likes gold moves of some sort in order to prevent this instead of dropping the pawn. Actually, dropping the pawn is like the third best move, so not so bad. And now, interestingly, in this position, I dropped this gold. I have a tendency to do this. I think you've seen these in a lot of the games that I've played so far where I feel like I'm very far ahead. And so I just start like over defending in like very ugly ways, right? This is probably a habit of mine that I need to break. I mean, this is just a very sad gold drop. But my thinking was, okay, I have to be winning anyway. So who cares? But here the engine just wants to run. And of course, like we mentioned this earlier, right? Like he really has no way of stopping this. So much so that the engine doesn't actually want to promote either of these pieces. It wants to play pawn 6-6. Why it wants to play pawn 6-6 specifically, I don't really know. I mean, I guess this is the only way to like sabaki or rook or something. But this is a very curious move. I don't know what it's about. And actually, I mean, the other move it wants to play is pawn 7-2, which makes a lot of sense, right? Really, the only way he's going to be able to do anything in this game is to get the dragon in play. And the only way to get the dragon in play is to deal with this pawn. So these two moves make a lot. Sorry, that move makes a lot of sense. This pawn 6-6 makes no sense. I don't even know what it wants to do. And yes, there is like this type of move, but king runs, and there's really no attack here, right? Even if something like this, I can just take, but my bishop is defending. But okay, I dropped the gold. He dropped the knight. I went ahead and did this bishop 5-5 move, which was a bit late. Um, and then my opponent, yeah, he's trying to get his rook involved, and he decides to sack it for the lance. I mean, the engine just wants to do this and say, "Hey, this attack is coming. I'm just not going to give you a rook, right? I mean, I only have 2 pawns in hand, so even though this is definitely a good position for me, if you would have kind of just like ran with the rook in this manner, it actually becomes a bit difficult for me to do. I mean, I think the only move I have is something like this, um, and then we would end up trading. Yeah, and then he has to try and do something like this to get this active again. So I think this is kind of what he needed to go for to have really any chance. But instead he sacks the rook off and tries to do this, this is definitely overcommitting to this left side of the board. I think, yeah, now that I look at it, okay, so the engine finds a very crazy move, which is pawn 2-4. And what it wants to do is to play this bowing pawn formation because my opponent can't drop a pawn in. So that's actually a pretty cool defense. I've seen this idea of the bowing pawn, but not specifically this implementation of it where you're using it against this second file like lance attack, right? Which is like a very common idea. Okay, so that's definitely a cool idea to take away. Other than that, I just had the idea that one of the big threats that my opponent had in the game was when his knight was here because it's blocking my king from running away. So it actually makes a lot of sense to just run my king first. I think this is also a theme in a lot of the other games of just like running your king beforehand, before your opponent can make moves that block it in. So that would have been a nice move had I found it. But instead, I decided to try and like defend. My opponent tries to kick the bishop. This is probably just a wasted move, honestly. I guess you give me the chance to mess up and go this way and like lose this diagonal. But once my bishop goes to 6-4, unless the plan is like, okay, sack all the pieces over here and drop something here, maybe. But then I still have this. So yeah, I think probably pawn drop in 5-6 is not a great move. What the engine wants to do is to just jump the knight immediately. This doesn't seem great to me either. Runs into pretty much the same problems that happened in the game, but without this pawn. But I guess then, okay, like you have a pawn potentially to drop to here, pawn potentially to drop to here. It's just the pawn on 5-6 just doesn't really do anything. Okay, so yeah, we get this knight jump, and here's probably the most dangerous part in the game for me. But what I read was, okay, if I'm gonna get a knight and I'm gonna drop it here. That's like all I was thinking. And when I do that, I want a rook on this 8th rank, right? So I want to set up like horse takes, and then drop a gold, or like knight drop, king runs, horse, or like I want to set up all these types of moves, and they really need the rook on this 8th rank. And okay, so technically, engine wanted it on 8-8. I don't really know what the difference is. It's not that big of a difference anyway. So here, I think my opponent makes a mistake. Ooh, interesting. Interesting move from the engine. I don't really understand it. It wants to do this, and then when I go here, then take. I don't really understand that. But I think basically like it's just very similar to what happened in the game, right? And the evaluation of the position is also basically identical. So I think it's kind of just like a throwaway non-move. Okay, so he starts with this knight move again. I don't know. I think once you give me the knight, it becomes like a pretty straightforward attack for me. I mean, I guess it's still pretty straightforward, right? Like I'm just coming with this, but yeah, I think I would have started with the lances and tried to not give away the knight. And again, this goes back to what I was saying before. I have this problem as well where I think a little bit too much about how I want to do things and not enough about what my opponent's trying to do. And if you think here specific, if he would have thought specifically about what I'm trying to do, the knight drop is very obvious. And obviously I don't have a knight in hand, and so the only way I'm going to get one is if he gives me one. So I think I would have tried to avoid giving that knight away. And here, yeah, again, this is definitely just not understanding that my goal is to drop the knight, right? Because you would never do this if you understood that the knight drop is coming, right? And so here, I think the move is something like this. Actually, I should. I mean, I have the engine. Yeah, yeah, okay. And you really have to deal with this knight drop. It's starting to sound like a bit of a broken record here, but yeah, like that's really the only move, right? Is to deal with the knight drop. Now I can move my bishop around. He can move his silver back. Interesting. It wants to just like take here, move here. But yeah, like, there's just no way for him to like prevent this even. Okay, well, okay, now he can prevent this, but like my king is just like completely safe in here. So I think about here after this gold gets dropped, I mean, obviously the game is completely over. It's basically mate. Um, but even here, it's going to be very very tough to defend this. Um, but for sure, the priority is to deal with a knight drop on 3-6, and if you don't address that, then that's why the game just kind of ends immediately. So yeah, that was like a really clean game for me. Like I made a couple slowish, like over defensive moves, like the gold drop over here, bringing the silver up. But other than that, I was pretty happy with how I played. Right, I recognized that this is my key attack, and it ended up winning the game for me. So yeah, that moves me to 3-2 in the Blitz tournament. This is game 5, so I have one more game to record because I forgot to record game 7. So yeah, thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you again in my recap of game 6. Thank you.